Alistair Finch, weary from the ceaseless sirens and claustrophobic concrete of Manhattan, sought refuge in Harmony Glade, a postcard-perfect suburb nestled just north of the city. It was March 2nd, 2025, and the crisp spring air held the promise of new beginnings, a chance to finally escape the relentless urban chaos and embrace the tranquility he desperately craved. He dreamed of quiet evenings, the soft rustle of leaves, and the absence of that nagging, low-frequency hum that had vibrated through his bones for far too long. This journey of discovery, he hoped, would lead to a life far removed from the unsolved mysteries that plagued his sleep each night in the city. The house, a charmingly outdated Victorian with a sprawling front porch and a riot of lilac bushes, seemed to whisper promises of peace. It was a blank canvas, a chance to create a sanctuary that reflected his own desire for calm. He envisioned lazy Sundays spent reading on the porch swing, surrounded by the sweet scent of blooming wisteria, and evenings filled with the gentle melodies of crickets rather than the cacophony of taxi horns. He wanted a thrilling story, but a story of quiet contentment, not one of high-stakes drama. The realtor, a woman named Brenda with a smile as bright as a freshly polished nickel, had painted a picture of a close-knit community, a place where neighbors still borrowed cups of sugar and gathered for summer block parties. He'd even imagined joining the local book club, a far cry from the cutthroat world of Manhattan law he was leaving behind. This move represented more than just a change of address. It was a fundamental shift in his life philosophy. As he unpacked the last of his belongings, a feeling of profound satisfaction washed over him. He surveyed his new domain, a haven of green grass and blossoming trees, and felt a sense of optimism he hadn't experienced in years. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his lawn, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He inhaled deeply, savoring the fresh, clean air. But even amidst this newfound serenity, a subtle disquiet began to stir. At the edge of his property, where the manicured lawn met a patch of untamed woodland, he noticed something out of place. Faint but unmistakable were the imprints of tire tracks. They weren't deep, but they were undeniably there, cutting a path across his freshly seeded grass. He dismissed them initially as remnants from the previous owner, perhaps a landscaper or delivery truck. Yet as days turned into weeks, the tire tracks became more pronounced, growing deeper and more frequent. The nagging feeling of unease intensified, a faint crack in the facade of his perfect suburban idyll. Little did Alistair know, these subtle tire tracks were merely the harbinger of a far more significant disruption. A subtle hint of the unsolved mystery soon to unfold in Harmony Glade. His journey of discovery was about to take an unexpected and unwanted turn. He was about to discover that his thrilling story was just about to begin, and it would be filled with unforeseen conflict and unwelcome confrontation. The idyllic days of Harmony Glade were rapidly fading from Alistair's perception. The subtle disquiet he'd felt upon first noticing the tire tracks had blossomed into a full-blown frustration that gnawed at his peace of mind. They were no longer faint impressions. They were now pronounced ruts, carving ugly scars across his meticulously maintained lawn, a stark reminder of the unwelcome intrusion. The unsolved mystery wasn't who was doing it, but why, and what audacity possessed them to treat his property with such disregard. He started keeping a closer watch, peering through the curtains of his living room window, a silent sentinel guarding his suburban kingdom. It wasn't long before he witnessed the transgression firsthand. A dark blue SUV, driven by a woman with impeccably coiffed hair and oversized sunglasses, brazenly veered off the road and onto his property, navigating the makeshift shortcut with practiced ease. As the SUV bumped its way across his lawn, Alistair's jaw tightened. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was deliberate, habitual. The wheels spun momentarily in the soft earth, kicking up clods of dirt and tearing at the delicate blades of grass. A wave of anger surged through him, a stark contrast to the tranquility he had so desperately sought. He recognized the driver. It was Brenda, the relentlessly cheerful realtor who had sold him the house, the very person who had promised him a peaceful existence. She didn't even slow down as she crossed his property, offering a quick, perfunctory wave as she merged back onto the road. The audacity of it all left Alistair speechless. The following days brought more of the same. A steady stream of vehicles, ranging from minivans to pickup trucks, casually traversed his lawn, transforming his once pristine property into a muddy, rutted mess. He watched in helpless fury as his investment, his sanctuary, was slowly being eroded. This wasn't just about the grass anymore. It was about respect, about boundaries, about the principle of ownership. He felt trapped in a thrilling story he never wanted to be a part of, a narrative where his peace of mind was constantly under threat. The internal conflict raged within him. He was by nature a non-confrontational man. He disliked conflict, preferring to avoid it at all costs. He had spent years mediating disputes in the courtroom, and the last thing he wanted was to bring that kind of drama into his personal life. But the constant invasion of his privacy, the blatant disregard for his property, was pushing him to his breaking point. He wrestled with the decision to confront the neighbors, knowing that it could potentially disrupt the harmonious facade of Harmony Glade. Would it be worth the risk? Would he be seen as the grumpy newcomer, the one who was ruining everything? As he stood by the window, watching yet another car navigate his lawn, Alistair realized that he couldn't remain silent any longer. His desire for peace was strong, but his need to defend his property, his boundaries, was even stronger. He knew that he had to take action, to reclaim his tranquility, even if it meant disrupting the fragile harmony of Harmony Glade. The journey of discovery had begun, and it was leading him down a path he never anticipated, a path that would test his character and challenge his very notion of community. Alistair, his patience wearing thin like an overused welcome mat, decided to seek help from the Harmony Glade Homeowners Association. He envisioned a swift resolution, a formal letter sent to the offending neighbors, a restoration of order and respect. He clung to the hope that the supposed guardians of community harmony, would swiftly address this egregious violation of his property right. He was about to enter a thrilling story of bureaucratic indifference that was to change the outlook on his community. He prepared meticulously, gathering photographic evidence of the tire tracks, documenting the frequency of the trespassers, and even compiling a list of potential legal remedies. He wanted to present a clear, irrefutable case, leaving no room for ambiguity or doubt. He believed that logic and reason would prevail, that the HOA would see the validity of his complaint and act accordingly. The meeting was held in the dimly lit community center, a sterile space decorated with generic landscape paintings and uncomfortable folding chairs. As he waited for his turn to speak, Alistair observed the other members of the HOA board, a motley collection of well-meaning, but largely uninspired individuals. Finally, his name was called. He approached the table, laid out his evidence, and presented his case with calm, measured tones. He explained the damage to his property, the constant invasion of his privacy, and his desire for a peaceful resolution. "I simply want the neighbors to respect my property lines and cease using my lawn as a shortcut," he concluded, looking directly at the board members, hoping to see a glimmer of understanding in their eyes. A brief silence followed, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner of the room. Then, a woman with a sharp, angular face and a condescending smile spoke up. It was Beatrice Vandergelt, a name Alistair recognized from the HOA directory. "Mr. Finch," she began, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, "while we sympathize with your inconvenience, the HOA's jurisdiction does not extend to that particular area of your property. It falls outside our purview, I'm afraid." Alistair stared at her in disbelief. "But it's my property," he stammered, struggling to maintain his composure. "They're causing damage, trespassing. I understand your concerns," Beatrice interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "But there's simply nothing we can do. Perhaps you could try speaking to your neighbors directly?" The other board members nodded in agreement, their faces betraying a mixture of apathy and discomfort. Alistair realized with a sinking heart that his plea had fallen on deaf ears. The very organization he had hoped would champion his cause was essentially washing its hands of the matter. As he left the community center, defeated and disillusioned, Alistair felt a wave of resentment wash over him. He had placed his faith in the community, in the supposed ideals of Harmony Glade, and he had been sorely disappointed. This journey of discovery had revealed the cold reality of bureaucratic indifference, and it had ignited a spark of defiance within him. He realized that if he wanted to protect his property, his peace of mind, he would have to take matters into his own hands. The unsolved mystery of how to achieve harmony in Harmony Glade was about to become his personal quest, and he was determined to find an answer, even if it meant disrupting the status quo. The HOA's dismissal was a turning point for Alistair. It wasn't merely a setback. It was a catalyst. The polite, conflict-averse lawyer from Manhattan had been pushed too far, and a new resolve began to solidify within him. He would no longer passively endure the constant intrusion and damage to his property. He would take definitive action. He was no longer participating in a thrilling story. He was writing his own. The decision was swift. He would build a fence, a sturdy, uncompromising barrier that would clearly delineate his property, and send a message to his inconsiderate neighbors that their shortcut was permanently closed. He imagined the fence as a symbol of his newfound assertiveness, a physical manifestation of his determination to protect his peace of mind. He began researching fence options, poring over brochures and websites, seeking a design that was both functional and aesthetically pleasing. He wanted something that would blend seamlessly with the surrounding landscape, a structure that would deter trespassers without turning his property into a fortress. He was still hoping to maintain a semblance of harmony, even as he prepared for potential neighborhood backlash. He contacted several local contractors, explaining his situation and requesting bids. Many were hesitant, wary of getting involved in what was clearly a neighborhood dispute. Whispers of the Harmony Glade drama were already circulating, and few wanted to take sides. Finally, he found a contractor, a gruff but honest man named Frank, who was willing to take on the job. Frank listened patiently to Alistair's explanation, nodding occasionally, his weathered face betraying no judgment. "I've seen this kind of thing before," Frank said, his voice raspy from years of working outdoors. "People get possessive about their property, especially in these suburban neighborhoods, but you've got a right to protect what's yours." Frank surveyed the property, assessing the terrain and the best way to construct the fence. They discussed materials, design options, and the potential challenges of building on uneven ground. Alistair opted for a classic wood fence, 6 feet high, with strategically placed no trespassing signs. As the construction date approached, Alistair felt a growing sense of anticipation, mixed with apprehension. He knew that the fence would likely provoke a strong reaction from his neighbors, especially those who had grown accustomed to using his property as a shortcut. He anticipated complaints, confrontations, and possibly even legal challenges. He mentally prepared himself for the backlash, rehearsing his arguments, steeling his resolve. He knew that he was doing the right thing, that he was standing up for his rights, and that he couldn't back down now. He knew this journey of discovery had just begun, and he was ready to take the next leap. He just had to take one leap at a time in this new unsolved mystery that he was working through. On the day the construction began, Alistair watched nervously from his window as Frank and his crew unloaded their equipment and began to dig the post holes. The rhythmic pounding of hammers echoed through the neighborhood, a sound that seemed to symbolize the breaking down of old boundaries and the creation of new ones. The fence was going up, and with it, Alistair's determination to reclaim his peace of mind and protect his property, no matter the cost. The passive bystander was gone, replaced by a proactive defender, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in the increasingly complicated landscape of Harmony Glade. The first rays of dawn had barely kissed the horizon when Alistair was jolted awake by a persistent, insistent pounding on his front door. He glanced at the clock. 6:00 a.m. Who could possibly be calling at this ungodly hour? A sense of foreboding washed over him as he pulled on a robe and cautiously made his way to the door. He peered through the peephole, and his blood ran cold. It was Beatrice Vandergelt, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and indignation. He hesitated for a moment, debating whether to simply ignore her, but he knew that wouldn't make her go away. Besides, he wasn't one to back down, and this thrilling story would only get more thrilling as he opened the door. Taking a deep breath, he unlocked the door and opened it a crack. "Beatrice," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "What is the meaning of this?" Beatrice shoved the door open, forcing Alistair to stumble backward. She stormed into the foyer, her eyes blazing with fury. "This is outrageous," she shrieked, gesturing wildly towards the newly erected fence. "What do you think you're doing blocking our shortcut?" Alistair stood his ground, his initial apprehension replaced by a quiet determination. "I'm protecting my property," he said calmly, his voice firm. "As I explained at the HOA meeting, That portion of land belongs to me, and I have every right to build a fence." Beatrice scoffed, her lips curling into a sneer. "That's ridiculous. We've been using that shortcut for years. It's a tradition. Who do you think you are, coming in here and disrupting our way of life?" Alistair felt a surge of anger rising within him, but he forced himself to remain calm. He wouldn't let her provoke him, wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. "Tradition doesn't give you the right to trespass on my property and damage my lawn," he said, his voice steady. "I tried to be reasonable, I tried to work with a HOA, but you left me no choice." Beatrice glared at him, her eyes narrowed. "You're just being spiteful," she hissed. "You're deliberately trying to make our lives difficult. What is your motive? Did you not get a warm enough welcome? Now you are looking for a thrilling story? My motive is simple. I want to protect my property and live in peace," Alistair replied, his voice unwavering. "That's all I want." "It is not one of the unsolved mysteries." Beatrice let out a derisive laugh. "Peace? You'll never find peace in Harmony Glade, not after pulling a stunt like this. You've made yourself an enemy of the entire community." "If protecting my property makes me an enemy, then so be it," Alistair said, his chin lifting defiantly. "I'm not going anywhere." Beatrice stepped closer, her face inches from his. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I will find a way to make you regret this." Alistair met her gaze unflinchingly. "I'm not afraid of you, Beatrice," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not afraid of anyone. All I want is to be left alone, to enjoy my property in peace. If you can't respect that, then you'll have to deal with the consequences." With that, he turned and walked back inside, leaving Beatrice standing on his doorstep, her face a mask of fury. As he closed the door, he knew that this was just the beginning. He had drawn a line in the sand, and Beatrice was clearly not going to let it go. The journey of discovery had taken a decidedly darker turn, and Alistair braced himself for the storm that was surely about to break. The slam of the door echoed through Alistair's house, a sound that resonated with the finality of a gavel striking a courtroom bench. He leaned against the door for a moment, catching his breath, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He knew that Beatrice's threat wasn't idle, that she wouldn't simply accept defeat. The question was, what would she do next? Would she rally the neighbors against him? Would she try to vandalize his property? He really didn't want his life to turn into a thrilling story against his will. He didn't have to wait long to find out. Barely 5 minutes had passed when he heard the shrill wail of sirens approaching. He peered through the window and his heart sank. A police car was pulling up in front of his house, its flashing lights casting an eerie glow across his lawn. He knew with a chilling certainty that Beatrice was behind this. She was using her perceived influence, her sense of entitlement, to weaponize the authorities against him. The realization sent a jolt of anger through him, but he quickly tamped it down. He couldn't afford to lose his temper, not now. He had to remain calm, rational, and prepared to defend himself. He took another deep breath, steeling his resolve, and walked out onto his porch as the officers approached. 2 uniformed officers, a man and a woman, approached him, their faces unreadable. The man, Officer Davies, stepped forward. "Mr. Finch?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. "Yes, that's me," Alistair replied, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "We received a call about an obstruction of a public roadway," Officer Davies said, glancing towards the newly erected fence. "Can you explain what's going on here?" Alistair nodded, relieved that he had anticipated this scenario. He gestured towards the fence, explaining the situation with calm, measured tones. "As you can see, I've built a fence along my property line," he said. "This area has been used as a shortcut by my neighbors, causing damage to my lawn. I tried to resolve this peacefully, but the HOA refused to intervene, and my neighbors continued to trespass on my property. So you decided to block off the road?" Officer Davies asked, his eyebrows raised slightly. "It's not a road," Alistair corrected him, his voice firm but respectful. "It's my property. I have the deeds and surveys to prove it." Officer Davies nodded, acknowledging his point. "Can you show me those documents, please?" Alistair readily complied, leading the officers inside and producing the relevant paperwork. As Officer Davies examined the documents, his expression softened. He could see that Alistair was telling the truth. that he was simply trying to protect his property rights. Meanwhile, the female officer, Officer Miller, remained outside, speaking with Beatrice, who was standing near the police car, her arms crossed, her face a mask of self-righteous indignation. Alistair could hear snippets of their conversation, enough to understand that Beatrice was painting him as the villain, as the disruptive newcomer who was ruining the harmony of Harmony Glade. Officer Davies returned, handing Alistair back his documents. "Mr. Finch," he said, his voice now tinged with a hint of sympathy, "it appears that you are indeed within your rights to build this fence. This area is clearly marked as your property." Alistair felt a surge of relief wash over him, but he knew that the situation was far from over. He could see the anger simmering beneath Beatrice's composed facade, and he knew that she wouldn't give up easily. However, Officer Davies continued, "We still need to speak with the individual who made the call. Can you tell me what prompted her to contact us?" Alistair gestured towards Beatrice, who was now marching towards them, her eyes blazing with fury. "I believe she can explain that herself," he said, his voice laced with a hint of sarcasm. As Beatrice approached, Alistair braced himself for another confrontation, knowing that this unsolved mystery that was his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. The police were here, and the drama was about to unfold under the harsh glare of flashing lights. Beatrice Vandergelt approached, her face a carefully constructed mask of injured innocence. She tossed her perfectly coiffed hair, her eyes darting between Officer Davies and Alistair as if assessing the battlefield. Alistair watched her, a sense of weary resignation settling over him. He knew what was coming, a performance designed to sway the officers to her side. He was ready for another thrilling story. "Officer," Beatrice began, her voice trembling slightly, "this man, Mr. Finch, has erected a fence that is illegally blocking a well-established public road. We've been using this access for years, decades even. It's how we get to the grocery store, the library, everything. It will affect the community, and is one of the unsolved mysteries this community has faced." Officer Davies, his expression unchanging, turned to Alistair. "Mr. Finch, would you like to respond?" Alistair, composed and armed with his truth, simply gestured to the documents Officer Davies had already examined. "Officer, as you've seen, the property surveys clearly indicate that this land belongs to me. There is no public road, and I am within my rights to build a fence on my own property." Officer Davies turned back to Beatrice, his tone still polite, but now carrying a distinct edge. "Miss Vandergelt, I've reviewed Mr. Finch's documents, and they appear to be in order. According to these surveys, this land is indeed private property." Beatrice's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Her voice rose in pitch, her composure cracking under the weight of her thwarted manipulation. "But that's not possible. There must be some mistake. We've always used that road." Officer Davies maintained a calm demeanor, his authority radiating outwards. "Ms. Vandergelt, regardless of past practices, the fact remains that this land is privately owned. Mr. Finch has the legal right to build a fence on his property, and you are required to respect that right. We are here for any thrilling story needed." He turned his gaze directly to Beatrice, his eyes unwavering. "I must advise you to cease using this property as a shortcut, and to refrain from any further harassment of Mr. Finch. If you continue to trespass on his land, or if you attempt to damage his property, you will be subject to arrest." The words hung in the air, a stark warning that finally pierced Beatrice's bubble of entitlement. She stood there for a moment, speechless, her face a mask of disbelief and thwarted rage. Then, with a frustrated huff, she turned and stalked back towards her car, muttering under her breath. "This isn't over," Alistair heard her say, though whether it was meant for him or herself, he couldn't be sure. Officer Davies turned back to Alistair, his expression now carrying a hint of sympathy. "Mr. Finch, I apologize for the disturbance. Miss Vandergelt's enthusiasm sometimes gets the better of her, but rest assured we will be keeping an eye on the situation." He paused, offering Alistair a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Just trying to keep the peace, sir. That's all anyone wants, right?" His journey of discovery from now on would have someone to look after him. Alistair returned the smile, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, officer," he said, sincerity lacing his voice. "I appreciate your understanding." He shook Officer Davies' hand, feeling a newfound sense of security. The scales of justice, it seemed, were finally balanced. It wouldn't be a simple journey, but he was on his way. As the police car pulled away, Alistair watched it go, a sense of quiet triumph washing over him. He had stood his ground, he had defended his rights, and he had won. The road ahead might still be bumpy, but for now, at least, he had earned a moment of peace. The unsolved mystery of whether he could find tranquility in Harmony Glade had been solved. The aftermath of the 911 incident was swift and decisive. Word of Beatrice Vandergelt's actions spread through Harmony Glade like wildfire, fueled by social media, neighborhood gossip, and a general sense of disbelief. Her attempt to weaponize the police against Alistair, a man who was simply trying to protect his property, had backfired spectacularly. Everyone was talking about the thrilling story that had unfolded in their seemingly placid suburb. The Harmony Glade Homeowners Association, already viewed with skepticism by many residents, found itself facing a storm of criticism. The community's initial reaction of "this can't happen to our neighborhood" turned to an aggressive and unified message of "how could you let this happen to our neighbor?" Residents flooded the HOA with angry emails, phone calls, and even in-person visits, demanding accountability for Beatrice's behavior. How could they have such a person on the board? What safeguards were in place to prevent this type of abuse of power? Under immense pressure, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Alistair, still wary but feeling a cautious sense of vindication, received an invitation to attend. He hesitated at first, unsure whether he wanted to subject himself to another encounter with Beatrice or the potential awkwardness of facing the rest of the board. However, the journey of discovery had brought him so far that he wanted to be there in person. In the end, he decided to go, feeling a responsibility to ensure that justice was served. When Alistair entered the community center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The board members sat around the table, their faces grim. Beatrice was noticeably absent. The HOA president, a man named Mr. Henderson, addressed Alistair, his voice contrite. "Mr. Finch," he said, "we want to apologize for the way you were treated by one of our board members. Her actions were unacceptable, and they do not reflect the values of this association." He paused, clearing his throat. "After careful consideration, the board has voted to remove Beatrice Vandergelt from her position, effective immediately." Alistair nodded, acknowledging the decision. It wasn't a personal victory, but it was a validation of his rights and a clear message that such behavior would not be tolerated in Harmony Glade. The meeting closed after a few comments. With the HOA taking action, the unsolved mystery had come to a satisfying end, and Alistair's life started to shift for the better. The weeks following Beatrice's removal from the HOA brought a gradual but palpable shift to Harmony Glade. The initial buzz of the incident slowly subsided, replaced by a newfound sense of community and a grudging respect for Alistair Finch. The fence, once a symbol of division, became a quiet reminder of the importance of boundaries and the right to protect one's property. Alistair noticed the change in the way his neighbors interacted with. The wary glances and hushed whispers were replaced by friendly greetings and genuine smiles. He even received a few apologetic notes from residents who admitted to using the shortcut in the past, expressing their remorse and promising to respect his property moving forward. It was clear that they were starting to understand the message behind the thrilling story. The journey of discovery had tested Alistair and changed him. He was no longer the conflict-averse lawyer seeking anonymity. He was Alistair Finch, the man who stood his ground, the defender of his own little corner of the world. He had found his voice, his strength, and a sense of belonging he hadn't expected in Harmony Glade. He even struck up an unlikely friendship with Frank, the contractor who had built the fence. They would often chat over the fence, discussing everything from gardening tips to local politics. Frank, it turned out, was a wealth of knowledge about Harmony Glade, its history, its people, and its quirks. As the seasons changed, Harmony Glade slowly healed. The tire tracks on Alistair's lawn gradually disappeared, replaced by lush green grass. The no trespassing signs remained, a silent reminder, but the need for them seemed to diminish with each passing day. One warm summer evening, Alistair sat on his porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. The air was filled with the gentle melodies of crickets, the very sounds he had longed for when he first moved to Harmony Glade. A sense of profound peace washed over him. The years in Manhattan seemed like a distant dream. The unsolved mystery that plagued his mind was at rest, and he appreciated the thrilling story he took part in. He had faced adversity, he had fought for his rights, and he had ultimately prevailed. He had found harmony, not in the absence of conflict, but in the courage to confront it. He was no longer just a resident of Harmony Glade. He was a part of its fabric, a thread woven into the tapestry of the community. As he looked out at his peaceful property, bathed in the soft glow of the moon, Alistair knew that he had finally found what he was looking for. A sanctuary, a haven, a place to call home. And it was all the more precious because he had fought for it, because he had earned it. The journey had been long and arduous, but in the end, he had reclaimed harmony. Alistair's journey in Harmony Glade offers profound life lessons. Firstly, stand your ground. Alistair's initial passivity allowed the trespassers to escalate, demonstrating that setting clear boundaries is essential in all relationships and situations. Don't be afraid of confrontation, even if it feels uncomfortable. Secondly, know your rights and assert them. Alistair's meticulous documentation and understanding of property law empowered him against the HOA. Educating yourself is crucial to navigate complexities and advocate for yourself effectively. Thirdly, community support is valuable, but self-reliance is paramount. Though initially disappointed, Alistair learned that relying on his own resources and determination brought about the most effective solutions. Balance seeking help with taking personal responsibility. Lastly, conflict can lead to unexpected growth. Alistair's transformation from passive to assertive not only resolved the immediate problem but also fostered self-respect and resilience. Embrace challenges as opportunities for personal development, as navigating your Harmony Glade can strengthen your voice.